right, welcome back to another Daily Bread. Today we're in Acts 27. We are so close to finishing Acts. If you've been here for the whole time, I appreciate you being here. But I've truly enjoyed getting to gain more knowledge in this specific book. I had vague knowledge of Acts before this, but I'm grateful to be in it more. Let's pray real quick and we'll get into it. God, I thank you so much for this ability to just have time in your word. I just ask that you'll put any of these words onto our heart, any of your words onto our heart, that we are worthy to keep and go forward, and that may be used to further your kingdom in some way. God, I just pray that you be with everybody here and just allow your will to be carried out in each and every one of our lives. It's in your great, powerful name that I pray. Amen. Almost stopped the video. All right, we're in Acts 27. Paul was pretty much King Agrippa, so there was nothing he could really do, but he called to be sent to Rome. So Paul's being sent to Rome here to be tried in Rome, which, because I know how this goes, is not a good thing, but we're gonna read it, and we're really close. But let's get into it. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, Paul and some other prisoners were handed over to the centurion named Julius, who belonged to the imperial regiment. We boarded a ship from, that's a city, Aderatium, close enough as I'm going to get, about to sail for the ports along the coast of the province of Asia, and we put out to sea. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was with us. The next day we landed in Sidon, and Julius, in kindness to Paul, allowed him to go to his friends so that they might provide his needs. From there we were put out to sea again. I'm sorry, I'll try to read better. Here we go. And passed to the lee of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. When we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us aboard. We made slow headway for many days and had difficulty arriving off Cnidus. Sidus. Silent N, maybe. Okay. When the wind did not allow us to hold our course, we sailed to the lee of Crete, opposite Salamone. We moved along the coast with difficulty and came to a place called Fair Havens, near the town named Lycia. Much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous, because now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss and to the ship and cargo, but also to our lives." But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul had said, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship. Since the harbor was unsuitable to the winter in, the major decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete, facing both southwest and northwest. Southwest and northwest. How does that make any sense? Must be extended out past it. I'm not going to sit on that, but that's an interesting way to phrase that. It must be, it's truthful, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's not much there I can really talk about. I wish there was something, but they're just taking a long time. Continue on. When a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called the Northeaster. I didn't read it. Northeaster in the Bible? Is this just a translation thing, or is this the first use of the name Northeaster? I think of that. I think about a storm in New England, but that's just me. Continue on. Called a nor'easter, swept down from the island. The ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. As we passed to the lee of the small island called Cauda, we were barely able to make the lifeboat secure, so the men hoisted it aboard. When they passed the ropes under the ship to hold it together, They passed ropes under the ship itself to hold it together because they were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars of Cyprus. They lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent battering from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. On the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. After they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, "Men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourself from the damage and loss. But now I urge you to keep your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Last night an angel of the God whom I belong and whom I serve stood before me and said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given your lives to all who sail. So keep courage, men. I have faith in God that it will happen just as he has told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island.'" This reminds me of the Joshua 9 verse, "Be strong and courageous." I think I highly condensed that, but that's the core of that verse. But just, Paul knows that he is destined to go to Rome to be heard by Caesar. And just like any of us, like, God is not done with us until we're dead. When we're dead, God is done with us. But until we die, God's not done with us. Paul knows that he must go to Rome. So he knows no matter how painful this shipwreck, or I guess he's probably hungry at this point because there's no food. And I assume since he's a prisoner, they're definitely not feeding him. And they ate before he did. And so Paul knows that his mission. He knows that he's going to make it there. So he has peace. And then God was even willing to send an angel to give him even more peace in this situation. And so, I mean, sometimes we got to be like Paul in that aspect. Just have peace and contentment that God is in control. Let's continue on. Verse 27. On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea. I know that one. I'll at least pronounce it right. When at midnight the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. They took surroundings and found that the water was 130 feet deep. Sometime later they were sounding again and found that it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down to sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and his soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes and held the lifeboats and let it drift away. That's wild. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days, he said, you've been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from your head." After this, he said, he took some bread and a single hair from his head. And he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of him. And he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food for themselves. Altogether there were 276 on board. When they all eaten as much as they want, they lighten the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. So did Paul or were they holding on to food? It doesn't say that Paul, this wasn't a moment where the bread was magnified, but they all ate a ton at that point, and then they threw the flour in the sea because they needed to lighten the ship. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach, and they decided to run the ship aground as they could, cutting loose the anchors. They left them in the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow of the ship was fast and would not move, and the stern was broken into pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered that those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on the side of pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached safely. Last chapter. Wow. I generally cannot believe that I've spent 27 days reading through this, and this is about to be day number 28. I think I missed one day, so it's been 28 days that it took me to read 27 chapters, which is a great pace. But I'm grateful to have this time to read. But Paul was confident in the fact that the Lord still needed him at this time. And Paul was able to, even in that position, to speak in a manner that emphasized God and showcased the Lord. Even in this circumstance where they didn't eat for 14 days, which is mind-boggling in itself because I didn't think you could go that long without food. So I don't know, it doesn't explain much into that, but they were definitely malnourished. They were not in a good position. Nobody on the ship was. But judging by this, and I don't know if it says any further, it seems as though the centurion has taken to Paul, and thus spared him in many ways and many things. And by Paul being spared, it also spared the rest of the prisoners so that they could get to land here and have the ability to live instead of being killed, I guess, kind of pointlessly. I guess they were worried about them being moved away, moving away from them once they got on land, like trying to run off. But at least all these people have a shot at longer life, and I assume Paul was very much able to talk to these people in his time here. But that's what I've got today. We got one more chapter tomorrow. I'm excited for it, and then we're going to move into Romans, and that is surely something that will give me vastly more to talk about. As much as I've enjoyed Acts, it is very much a historical document, as in it's more cut and dry with the historical part, and there's not a lot to break down. But I can't wait to move into Romans and then on from there, just continuing on. But I'm grateful for each and every one of you that watch and listen to this every day. And if you made it this far, I really appreciate you. Hope you all have a great day. Be blessed.